Elizabeth. Nice to meet you. So my name is Julia, and I'm going to be facilitating a conversation today.
Mhm.
Can you start by introducing yourself to us? So what year in school you're currently in, and also the subject that you eventually did your research in?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Elizabeth Liu. I'm from Beachwood High School and I'm in the 11th grade. So I'm a junior right now. And the subject of my paper was the Wars of the Roses, focusing on using Fieron's bargaining model to analyze the events of how, after the Wars of the Roses, the Tudor dynasty uh, managed to resolve, well, not exactly resolve, but prevent further military conflict between the nobility and the monarch.
So interesting. Um, Before we dive into the specifics of, your paper and the research that you've
Mhm.
done, I do want us to, maybe walk a couple weeks back,
Yeah,
looking at, even before you applied. So
yeah.
did you apply to the program knowing that you wanted to do this specific topic, or were you just open to anything history related?
Yeah, well, I was actually a bit unsure about what I would actually write my paper about. In the end, I applied to both this course with Professor Shadowan about the causes of war and game theory, and I also applied to a couple of more economic-based or business-based courses. So I knew that if I went this route, I would probably end up focusing on something more history based. Though a couple of my peers actually did more modern based papers on uh, the conflicts in Yemen. I know one of them did, and um, the water crisis in the Middle East, I believe, and comparing it to the water crisis in like the US, where it's been happening in California and Arizona. But I ended up choosing something more history based because that's something that I'm really interested in, and I'm a bit of a history buff, and I really enjoy looking at um, kind of historical context and comparing it to the modern day and comparing because you can really kind of see the impact of a historical event that has happened like a while ago. Whereas when you're looking at something more in the modern day, you're kind of um, guessing a little bit more about what you think will happen. So that's why I ended up choosing that uh, that area of time.
That totally makes sense. It sounds like you know, um, I guess academic aside, you know what kind of a person you are, right? So,
Yeah.
judging from what you said about history, I think certainty probably provides you, um,
Mhm.
a lot more comfort than, making hypotheses about the future. And so that's
Mhm.
something that you knew coming to the program already, but you didn't
Yeah.
necessarily know where this was going to land you specifically.
Yeah.
And it's also very interesting that even though it was a group class, that all of you guys, ended up doing topics that are so vastly different.
Yeah. Hmm.
Can you first tell us the course title that you did, and then talk a little bit about how, you guys were able to, have the variety even within such a structured course?
Yeah. So the course title was actually I'm not sure if I'm remembering the exact title, but it was Causes of War and Game Theory with Professor Stephen Shadowan. And even though we obviously were all attending lectures on the same types of topics, the course structure was offered in a way that you could apply the contents of of the lectures to a variety of different events and contexts. So I guess the professor, I think, actually, the context of the course was more about applying it to the modern day. I kind of took a twist on what we learned and applied it to a more historical event. And also, one other student did choose a topic a little bit more historical. I think he did something around the Cold War, and that's not as recent, of course. Um, but we talked about topics such as alliances between nations and um, game theory, of course, and looking at the numerical aspects of game theory, and also the bargaining model, which of course can be applied to both modern and historical context. So everything that we discuss in the course could be applied to both a modern and historical context, which is why all the students that all of my peers and I kind of went in a variety of directions.
So you also use the word discussion a lot.
Mhm.
So was it mostly a discussion based course, or was it lecture, or was it a mix? How did that go?
It was definitely a mix because there was kind of a lecture structure, but then embedded within the lecture were questions that he would ask us, and he would ask us to discuss what we thought about it, our interpretation, or ask us to answer questions as like reviewing stuff from the previous week and applying it to what we were learning in the next week of the course.
And so within that, I know that you talked about, the information being so malleable and flexible. How
Mhm.
about within between the classes and within the lecture, articles that were presented to you guys, was it more theory based or was it more case discussion?
It was, I think, majority case discussion. Actually, one of the topics we discussed over the summer was talking about Hamas and Palestine and Israel and the context, the conflict that was brewing there. And obviously, we see how that played out in the modern day. So I was actually looking back at the course content like a couple of months ago, and I like remembered that, and I just thought it was um, pretty crazy that we were talking about that stuff months before the actual conflict kind of exploded, and it's playing out in the modern day um, as we are watching. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to, deep historical roots, number one, but also number
Mhm. Yeah.
two, the fact that the, lecture content also really grasps onto, what's happening in the real world versus it staying on a
Mhm.
theoretical level.
Yeah.
Um, so by the time you transitioned to the latter half of the program, and you were eventually scavenging for your own articles, doing your literature review, what did the course content look like? Was it still lectures, or was it more writing feedback? What was that like?
Mhm. So the majority of the latter half was continuing the lectures. And then I think the last week or so, we had more of a focus on like the ending of our writing process. And then like seeing how we could progress from there after the course had ended. And just so yeah. Um, Let me think of how I can explain this a bit better, but we continued the lectures up until the last week or the last 2 weeks. And then after that, in both the supervision and with Professor Shidoan and also the TA sessions with Dr. Mangini, uh, were focused on getting feedback on what we had already written, talking with the professor and with Dr. Mangini about how we could progress from there and what topics we could delve into deeper. And then after that, after the course had ended, um, I think we had around like 2 weeks after that where we worked on it by ourselves, and then we submitted it to Professor Shadowan for review. I forgot what it's called, but the student assessment portion of the program where the professor kind of reviews our progress throughout the course and reviews what we've written. And after he reviewed that, he sent it back to us with feedback embedded into the document so that we could keep on improving and ultimately like finish the project.
So you kind of detailed a very structured approach to the class and the paper? Would you say that, support was also very accessible? Multiple checkpoints throughout you generating your ideas, writing your paper. Did you feel supported?
For the most part, yeah. Um, so we had like sessions at the beginning of a few of the lectures with Professor Shadow, and where he would check in on how our research was going, if we like how much progress we had made within the last week. Um, but I think one downside of doing it over the summer, personally for me, was that there was a lot of time that was kind of condensed, because we had 2 hours of lecture for like the first half of the program at least. So that was like 2 hours per week with both the professor and with the TA. And um, I think although during the summer you have more time to work on it, having everything condensed like that made it a little bit difficult to move forward with the personal project, because you were working on the outside of course homework, and also trying to juggle that with uh, doing research on your own. And also it was, the time management was personally a little bit difficult for me, but yeah.
Yeah, I do, what I sense is that it's a downside just based off of the information that you're being inundated
Mhm.
with, right?
Yeah,
Um, and
it's just so much information at once. It's like system overload.
yeah, and I think at the same time it really speaks to this very unique aspect of
Mhm.
how the class sizes are packed at so small, so then you can make these schedule condensations versus if you have a
Mhm.
cohort of 30 people, then people's
Yeah,
schedules won't allow it
yeah.
to happen.
Mhm.
So it can be a downside and an upside and really dependent
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the course and the content and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, I do want
Yeah.
you to say,
Actually,
yeah,
I just want to interject for a second. To speak on the upside of it, is that it was just a really big challenge for me. And personally, as a student, I really enjoy challenges. I look for challenges. I I don't really enjoy education with no challenges, because that's just very boring, and it's not going to help you grow at all. So um, I definitely appreciated the challenge of it very much. And by that like last 4 weeks of the course, I was kind of just thinking, okay, the course is almost ending soon. I really need to kind of step it up and like ramp up my research and get myself together. And in the end, it worked out pretty well. I still have to adjust a couple things in my paper. I had a lot of uh, a lot of bouts of sickness in the last 4 months, and I didn't really find the time to make my final adjustments in order to submit for publication. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. But near the end of the course, those last 4 weeks, it was a really big challenge for me, and I enjoyed kind of dealing with that challenge and um, growing as a student in order to face that challenge. And yeah.
it almost sounds a little bit like a boot camp experience.
A little bit.
Um, but I do think that, we ought to like strike a balance, right, between like the
Mhm,
challenge and the support. And so now
mhm.
that you're, sort of not as actively, in the like the course content and all those things, and you're sort of making your own adjustments on the side. Are
Mhm.
you hoping to showcase your paper in some way? And, have you heard about support for that process as well?
Yeah, the CCIR team has definitely been very helpful in that aspect. Um, I was kind of, uh, well, originally my plan was to finish in around December. Obviously, that didn't work out. I had a lot of kind of health issues around the last couple of months, but the CCIR team was really helpful in kind of looking at my paper and just seeing if it was up to standard to the publication that I'm hoping to submit to, and also helping me look for different. Uh, I'm forgetting the word for it, but I think conference opportunities where I could have the opportunity to show, to speak about my paper to a panel, and um, yeah, that's those sort of opportunities, and um, it's been a very helpful resource for me personally.
And it sounds like that process has extended beyond, um,
Yeah.
14 weeks of class time.
Yeah.
So, how about, after the course, or towards the end of the course, like the relationship between you and your mentor, Professor Schnoen, like what was it look like if you were to ask for letters of recommendation? I'm not sure if you did,
Yeah, I have.
yeah, what was that process like?
Yeah, so I just kind of reached out to him really. This was around December, I think. So it was a while after the course had ended. So I just reached out to him with a couple like updates about me that I talked about with him during my time at the course. One of them was this this literary and artistic magazine I established called The Introspect. And he kind of offhandedly mentioned, you really got to show that to me once you guys finish the issue. And I ended up sending it to him, and he really enjoyed it. And a little while after that, I reached out to ask him if he would be willing to write a recommendation letter for me for a scholarship I was applying to. And he was um, I can't I don't remember the word, but he was very enthusiastic about helping me with that, and he was very willing to help me with that, and yeah.
Yeah, that's so good to hear. And I think it's also such a little like a warming little anecdote where
Yeah.
remembered not just you as a student but also the fact, right? Which
Hmm.
I imagine was like, a passing story that you were mentioning to him, but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's really incredible. If we were to, go again like all the way back, was there something that, now in your position, um, you wish you had known before you applied to the program so you can better maximize your time through the course?
Mhm. One thing I definitely wish I would have realized was just how my course was structured, whereas we condensed the entire course within the summer. Um, so it was, I think the entire course was like 14 hours and supposed to go on throughout 14 weeks. So we ended up condensing it to around 8 weeks. And I wish I realized that because like up until the last couple of weeks, I wasn't really expecting it to end so soon. And yeah, and I wish I could have like started really ramping up the research a little bit earlier so I could have had more time to discuss things a little bit more thoroughly with my professor mentor, Professor Shadowan, and the TA. And also, one other thing, um, I'm currently blanking on what I was going to say, but um, sorry, I completely forgot that train of thought.
It totally happens to me as well. But just speaking on the points that you did talk about,
Mhm.
it sounds like communication was a little bit of an
Yeah.
issue, and so that would have
Mhm.
definitely helped if you were like told from the beginning that okay, this was going to be a
Yeah.
condensed process, and even reminded throughout the process that this was
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that happened, this was a little bit of a communication issue, but I was told that uh, there would be kind of check-in emails from the CCIR academic team weekly, kind of talking about the where we should be in the process and that sort of thing. But um, I'm not really sure what happened with that, but I only ended up receiving three of those emails, one at the very start, one around the midpoint, and then one, I think, on the last week. So that was another of the kind of small communication issues that uh, ended up um, kind of making me, well, not as prepared to go through the process and be like have more checkpoints. Um, and because I wasn't really sure where I should have been in the process of researching my paper throughout the first couple of weeks. And then by the time it was the ending, I was kind of jolted into the realization that I really was not where I wanted to be in the process of writing my paper, and I really had to kind of ramp it up throughout the last couple of weeks in order to get everything figured out and get everything finished.
That's such excellent feedback. And I think it almost leads to my next question, which is what
Mhm.
are some study habits, right, that you found to be really helpful to you? Or if you were to do it again, what are some study habits that you think would help future students? So, for example, one that I'm hearing right now is to get used to doing a lot of reading, right? And
Yeah.
maybe be able to like parse it out and divide it between weeks. So, how would you elaborate on that?
Um, One thing that I would say is taking notes is very key. This might be something that depends person to person, but personally for me, I think a lot better and I absorb information a lot better when I'm taking notes on what's happening. It just helps me focus a lot. And that definitely helped me throughout the entirety of the course where I had like a binder where I wrote down notes of what was occurring during the lecture and like key concepts. And this was especially really helpful when we had discussion during the course time about kind of connecting the things from previous lectures to what we were currently learning in that session. Because I had kind of a mode to like flip back and look at what like specific key terms that I may have forgotten otherwise, um, and like bring them up in the current lecture and uh, kind of apply those key terms to what we had been learning then. So that's definitely one big recommendation that I would have.
Yeah, it helps ensure continuity between
Hmm.
the
Yeah,
courses, and I'm sure it also helps because you're sort of engaged in a process that builds upon each lecture, right? So the notes are
yeah,
really fundamental to your whole brainstorming, sketching process, and so you really want to go beyond, the slides or readings that are provided to you.
hmm.
Great, thanks. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you would love for future students to know?
I would say definitely be aware of the resources that CCIR has to offer as a program as well. For example, um, you can request articles. Uh, there's a lot of articles online that you can't just immediately access from maybe your own resources. Maybe your school doesn't have like access to a database like that where you can get easy access to academic articles. But um, I would say requesting sources and also requesting um, like one thing that I actually asked after the course program was over was I uh, was asking about the different conferences that I might be able to apply to, and CCR was a big help in helping me be more aware about what was out there and what was available, and helping me with like looking for programs that were in my area. I'm from Ohio, so yeah, so looking for like programs or conferences like nearby me, and because I personally, my school doesn't really have anything that would be helpful for me in that process of looking for programs like that. So just being aware of all the things that CCIR has to offer in order to help you with um, creating your paper and also after what to do after you've created your paper. So
Yeah,
yeah.
so just a little bit of summary. You mentioned before writing the paper, like as you're scavenging, so to help with the
Hmm.
literature review process. And then as you're writing, there's also writing feedback support that you
Hmm.
mentioned. And then afterwards, there's also like showcasing your work support, which is not limited to,
Yeah.
papers, it's also
Yeah.
conferences and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's a perfect summary.
So I really, really am excited for your paper, and I hope that like, I have my fingers and toes crossed. I hope it gets, accepted to one of the conferences or papers that you're submitting it to. And so, hopefully that goes well. And
Yeah,
thank you so much for
hopefully.
sharing
Yeah.
all your experiences and wisdom
Mhm.
with us today.
Thank you so much for interviewing me.